Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Today part 1 of my Melodic House template explanation. This template basically I've made live on my other Audio React channel. I put it in the description if you wanna come. I do live stream every 2 Sundays. And yeah, today we're gonna go over the template, how I made each track, why the MIDI note and everything. And next week we will talk a bit more about the arrangement, mixing and mastering. So yeah, let's have a listen. It's Melodic House, it's a bit of melodic techno, melodic house, progressive house, and it sounds like this. Alright, you get an idea of the main theme. And the first track, it's Sidechain. Basically, this track, it's a 909 clap. You cannot hear it because it's on send only. And it's a clap that I use as a trigger for my Sidechain compression. And I use it as well, as you can see, like kind of guideline of the track, you know, each different part, the length. And first is the kick drum. So kick drum, nothing crazy. It's just a kick drum with a bit of EQ and reverb. Just to boost a little bit the click and add a bit of body. I feel after when I finished the track was missing a bit of body in the kick and the bass, so I boosted it a bit here. And a bit of reverb. The reverb is kind of enhancing the click and help the kick cut through the mix. It's very subtle amount, 4% or even with a very short decay. And I always feel like it helped the kick fit as well, the mix. So 4-to-flow pattern. Alright, then we have the hats. So you have first a close hi-hat, classic offbeat close hi-hat. So with the kick. Just a classic sample. I use this rack, I put the link in the description. It's a rack I made especially for hats. And I just kind of reduced it a little bit. The high frequency was a bit harsh, but very gentle. The overall processing, I'm gonna talk about it in a second. Then we have a shaker, which is coming here. Here in terms of pattern, we have this kind of crescendo velocity pattern. So you see it's going up, down, and then up. Imagine you kick it here, 1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. So it's going up offbeat, exactly offbeat, the stronger velocity, and down, and it's what gives you this driving effect, the takata takata. And you can see actually there is a little thing here. You have like one playing just before the kick, rather than the second one is not. So it's given a different groove as well. In terms of sound, nothing much to say. I just add a bit of delay, you can hear. An EQ just to boost a little bit. This is more like a mixing, but yeah, and then a bit of sidechain, and then we have some ride, which is kind of this is like kind of a noisy ride. It's kind of add a bit of extra energy. It's very noisy, and again I just remove a frequency that I didn't like. And the stereo, this is a delay that I use as a hash effect to make it a bit stereo, and again some sidechain compression. And then now we're gonna talk about the overall process. So this is something I usually like to do with the drum. I will add overall reverb just to make it a little bit less dry, and then I will add drum bass for 2 reasons. First, I will add some crunch, which is gonna add some extra harmonics just to make it a bit louder and a bit more in the front. And then I use the transient negatively because I just add the reverb and reduce the tail of the reverb. It's kind of acting as a gate, so it's shorten a little bit your reverb tail. So the main idea is to have a large room, but usually when you have a large room, you have a large tail. And with the drum bass and the transient negatively, what you can do is reduce the tail. So you still have the feeling of a large room, but you reduce the tail of the reverb and you have best of both worlds. So here it's very subtle because the reverb is not that big, but that's usually the trick I do. Then we have a clap, so we're gonna have playing every 2 beats. Here, nothing special. I just add a bit of overdrive to just this little extra crispiness. And then a bit of reverb, but this is just... I will talk about reverb a bit more next week when I talk about mixing. I use the snare roll. This is just for the 3rd break. It's like a rolling snare drum. So you can see the velocity is going up, so the volume is going up. And this is classic snare roll. It's just to build the tension, to help build the tension during the... As the sound gets louder, the energy and the intensity increase and the tension increase. All right, then we have some percussion. We can hear them well at the beginning. You have this kind of percussion like this and more like kind of a clave or... And the pattern, this one is like... You can hear the syncopation, especially with the clave as well. So with the kick. And that's get you something a little bit syncopated and groovy. And in terms of processing, again, just reverb and the drum bass exactly the same I did and I show you for the hats. A bit of crunch for loudness and transient to reduce the reverb tail. Just a bit of reverb. Usually with percussion, the reverb, I rarely go above 1 second and I have a dry wet under 20-30%. And yeah, and finally I have another percussion, which is the Tom, which is played just for the intro, the outro. I didn't want to put it in the middle of the track because it's more like for when the bass is not playing. You can see here it's playing when the bass is not playing and here as well. And the pattern is just playing right after the kick. So you will have your kick here and it's like... And again here, because I have already other perc, I kind of sparse my percussion so that everything is not like all together or too compact and there is not too much. So the whole drum together kind of like... Well, not too complicated, not too overdoing it because after it's getting too much messy. Keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Yeah, let's move into the bass. So the bass, the pattern. It's kind of a classic melodic techno bass pattern or progressive house or melodic house pattern. I made a video about this stuff of melodic techno bass pattern. If you want to check it out, I'll put it in the description. But yeah, you have the one off beat here and then after you have just after the beat and just before the beat. So it's getting this, which work really well with the kick drum. So here I play F, the track is in F minor by the way, and the BPM is 122, I forgot to mention at the beginning, but yeah. So the patch is pretty basic and standard, that's the one I use most of the time. It's a saw wave, which is usually rich and harmonic, and you apply a low pass filter that you will modulate with a very sharp envelope to open quickly the filter just to get the transient and the high tone for your bass, and it's creating this nice plucky sound. You see your filter is opening very fast with an envelope which is have a short decay. The amplitude is like the default one. I add a bit of sub. Yeah, then after it's saturated to kind of add a bit of grit. Sidechain compression. And then I boost a little bit here with just the mid-high. You will hear with reverb is better. And then delay. So delay is gonna have a bit of groove and a bit of reverb. And then I just low pass a little bit. So you have 3 layers of the bass. That's the first one. Then you have a second one, which is basically I duplicated the same track. So it's exactly the same track that I duplicated. You can see this, the effect is the same chain. Except down here I remove the sub and I use square waveform to have a different kind of tone. So I use for oscillator 1, but I use for oscillator 2. But the oscillator 2 I detune by 7 semitone, which is the 5th, so it gets kind of create a nice tone if you are. So here the thing is, I use this to add a bit of harmonics, but I kept the filter down because if you open it too much after, it's kind of getting messy and it's kind of taking the idea of the bassline and the purpose of the bassline out of the context, and you feel like it's 2 tracks in 1 track. So keep it close, just a little bit. You see, it's very subtle, eh? But it adds this little, in the context of a track, if I remove, very subtle and very nice. Then I have sub. So this I added afterward once the track was finished. When I was mixing, I felt like the kick and bass, it was missing a bit of low end. So that's why actually I made the boost as well here on the kick. And I had the sub bass on the synth. So it's just a sine wave, and I even use the sub of the synth. It's playing the same pattern now. All the time it's the same pattern. And it's just a sub in mono, basically. It's just a sine wave. But yeah, obviously it adds a bit of body to your sound. So this obviously, if you're on headphone, you might not hear it too much, but if you have a loudspeaker and with a sub, you will hear it straight away. But yeah, that's for our bass. Now we're gonna talk our main lead. So this is an interesting one. It's basically a chord progression. So there is few things which are a bit uncommon. To start, the length of the pattern, as you can see, it's stopping here, so it's 3.1.2, which is kind of a little bit weird. You can see as well with the note, sometimes you have like notes which are very short and right after. Reason being because I record this playing live with the push. I was playing chords and I just record and it was sounding good like this, so I just quantize and leave it like this. And so hence the weird length of the loop, hence that there is this little note, because this basically means the note is playing as well. Even if it's short, you can still hear it. If I remove it, you're gonna see, but you can see even here the root is not playing, but still compared to, you have this dun dun dun, and like the interval between the notes is pretty no random, but there is no really like rule or like methods that I've used that make it work. It's like I said, I just record it live and you can see the interval. It's like 1 note here you have 1 note, 1 note here you don't have interval. You can see here's, keep in mind that this not count even if they are very short. And yeah, I just record something like that, which was very groovy with the kick. So, and because the length of the loops is not exactly like 4 bar or 2 bar, and this kind of create a shift, it's kind of polymeter rhythm, which kind of make it your chord progression a little bit more interesting, because it feel like it's never really like the same 8 bar loop which is running or 4 bar loop which is running. Now in terms of chord progression, we have a C sharp major, so you see 1 2 3 4 plus 4 major, but then you have as well C, which is basically the major 7th, and here we have F minor, so the remember is the tonality of the track, F minor, 1 2 3, and then we have 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, which is this time the minor 7th, and finally here we have C minor, 1 2 3, and then 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, which is the minor 7 again. And yeah, and then it's just repeat over and over. Now in terms of sound, I use my classic lead rack. I will put the link in the description if you want to find out more about this rack. And I made some modification, and just let me reset like the default, which sounding like that. So the sound itself quickly is a sawtooth waveform, and here you kind of have a sine wave sawtooth, but there is few things I modify. First, I bring the attack down so I have a more plucky sound. The oscillator one, I bring it to a more kind of a sine wave waveform. You can see like it's both, they are kind of sine wave, but I'm gonna add a bit of FM on the second oscillator, and the second oscillator I'm gonna pitch it an octave upper, so you're gonna have, and obviously I need to have the second oscillator. this is without the FM. With the FM, because the FM is on the second oscillator as well. And other thing which characterize the sound is this vibrato effect. Vibrato, it's a pitch modulation. So like I say here, you can see you have the pitch modulated by LFO2, which is at 8 Hz, which is usually like kind of the vibrato rate, and it's at this little excitement. But yeah, that's how it was made. And then it's just a bit of sidechain. This is the rack I made. It's free, by the way. I will put it in the description. You can go and grab it. And then I felt like I could add something extra. So I created this lead 2. I keep the same chord progression. Here, the idea is to have two sawtooths. So you have one from the basic shape and you have one from the basic shape. A bit of set to add a bit of body. And here a few things. The unison is very important. So the unison is gonna create this detune and spread the sound over the stereo. So if I remove it, 30% free voice. And then one of the particularity of the sound as well, you can hear this kind of filter modulation. So 12 dB filter, and I modulate it with envelope 2, which have a bit of attack around 30 milliseconds. So kind of create this flirty, brassy kind of sound. So that's what gives you this rich sound. So then in terms of process, this is the raw sound, which is quite rich already. Saturator. You can see it had this nice distortion on the top. And EQ just to make sure everything under 80 Hz. It's good. I didn't want it to cut too much because, I mean, it was already sounding good like this. And sometimes when you cut too much after, your track feel kind of empty, and leaving a little bit sometimes helps your track glue with the rest of the track. So I left it. A bit of sidechain. Remember, the trigger is the sidechain track here. Delay slightly. Very slight. I didn't want it to overdo it. Sometimes I overdo and it's getting very messy, so just be careful. Bit of reverb. And then it's just some volume and panning. I will talk about it next week. This synth is really what's gonna add modulation and variation. You can see sometimes it's at a very low, so you hear more the lead one playing, even though it's still there. And then after, I'm gonna open it in the second part of the chorus and you hear more the second one. And I like to do this movement with the filter. You can hear like it's like kind of opening and then closing. So for example, like here. Yeah, that's basically our lead, and it's playing the whole track. Now we have two synths, which are called here synth intro and here candy, which are not elementary, but it's the kind of synth that they are here, but you know, you don't really pay attention. You don't really hear them, except if you really pay attention to them. But if you remove them, you feel it's missing something. So you're gonna hear at the beginning. See, it's not that loud. I use exactly the same patch than lead 2. Basically, it's exactly the same oscillator. You can see with the basics wavetable, the unison, except that I changed the envelope. So instead of having something plucky and I have something more sustained, so I bring up the sustain. So like that, I can have something legato and playing like continuously the whole track. And obviously it's heavily filtered. It gives this melancholy. The chord playing is always the same. It's like C sharp, F, C. So you remember it's the major 7th. So we just play at the intro and the outro. I didn't play in the middle of the track because it just adds some content, some harmonic content, some stereo, and it's just, you don't really hear it, so it's not really necessary. It's better to get rid of. And so like this, you don't get your mix too messy. And I use it intro, outro. And I have this, which I call ear candies, which are the same. It's kind of this little high sound that you barely hear them, but if you remove them, you feel like something is missing. And again, here I used exactly the same patch than lead one and the same MIDI as well, except that what I've done is I've duplicated the chord, so you have the same chord playing at 2 different octaves. You see, at the 4th and the 5th octave, and something a bit more pluckier. This I reckon is very subtle, but... But that's the point of ear candy sound usually, it's like just to add this little nice detail that you barely hear. And yeah, so then we have piano. So basically this is, I think, the first melodic things I create when I was creating the template. And but you can see it's still always the same C sharp, F, C, playing over 2 octaves. And I use the grand piano from Ableton, so I use this velocity, so like this I just have like very soft and mellow notes, an octave down to make it a bit more darker and lower in the frequency spectrum, and you can see a big EQ to kind of muffle the sound. A bit of delay and reverb, and see it's heavily filtered. So this again creates a bit of mood during the track. Alright, then you have marimba, you have 2, so you have one which is... This is very important in this style of track and this music genre, is like having this note or this end playing a single note at a certain rhythm but repetitively, and it's kind of create this hypnotic a bit effect. And you see it like the space between is 2 notes and it's always like that, so it's kind of shifting a little with the kick, and that's what creates this. I could have done it like as a polymeter and having like, for example, you see it should be like the length should be like 3 bars, so polymeter with the kick, so that's what's create this hypnotic effect. Here I keep it like 8, so you can see at the end of the bar it's kind of repeating and restarting. You can do both, I've done like this time, but yeah, it's just a marimba sound that play like this and create this kind of yeah, hypnotic and a bit melancholic sound. Dun, 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 dun. And then I use the same marimba, it's the same effect, to add a bit of variation in the verse. I create a different pattern. It's like kind of a harp. So here I wanted something simple because you don't want to steal the show of your main lead. You just want something to add a bit of variation. So it's just going like up. So again, C sharp, F, and we have G sharp here. And it's exactly the same. And you can see here, instead of playing on the beat, it's playing like just right before the beat. So it's doing dun 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 dun. And this I use it because during the track, you see you hear the lead almost the whole track, and I needed a moment during the verse to get rid a little bit of the lead and to take the attention out of the lead, because otherwise you always listen to the same lead the whole track and it can get boring. So this marimba here is to kind of having something new, fresh, to make it a bit forgot about the main lead. So this way after you can bring it back to the main lead. Alright, then you have strings, which are all of this orchestral. The piano, the marimba is Ableton packs, so it's things that are available with Ableton Live Stock. You just have to download and install them. You have mallet, piano, string, brass, and again the chord, you can guess it what it's gonna be. C sharp, F, C. And yeah, just with a bit of reverb and EQ, like to kind of introduce it. And this really attention to your track. Give this weird mood as well. Alright, then come the ambience. So you have 2 types. You have one which is kind of a rain, which is kind of a crackle. Instead of using a vinyl crackle, I'd say why not to use like kind of a rain on an umbrella. This is from a website called 99 Sound, which you can get for free and you can use them. And you have all of this kind of nature sound, which can be great to add a bit of organic feeling to your sound. And the second one is more like a noise. You see, I think it's like a nature forest ambient. But here there is something, I will talk about it more next week in the arrangement, but here there is something special. Basically in this loop, this was not intended first, but you have a moment where kind of the rain intensify. or the wind, intensify. And I kind of using as a noise SFX for example, the transition. And so that's why you can see like it's kind of cut it and you have some crossfade. So I use kind of as SFX as well, but as well as ambience. So then you have SFX, which are kind of like this with a Synth one. You have the ride one. So to create this kind of SFX is very easy. Usually what I do is to use a single shot of any of sound of your track. So for example, here I use the lead, and for example, I just use one chord, very short, and one single hit that I put into a lot of reverb. And so you get something with a lot of reverb. Obviously, you put the dry weight amount of the reverb very high, so you don't have that much of the original sound. And it's creating, with the long reverb of the tail, it's creating this long sound. And once you have this, you Control D duplicate and you press R to reverse, and you have this kind of reverse ambience that you can use as SFX to kind of introduce sound. And I've done the same with the ride as well. I put a ride into a lot of reverb, freeze and flatten. You have on Ableton, you can do like if you right click, you can freeze the track and then flatten, and you have everything ready. And then you have some noise that I use just operator, and I modulate the filter and the gain to creating this kind of rising noise. And these are usually for the transition and for the build up as well, a little, or drop when you drop the sound. It always helps. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Then we have some Mixdown. I will talk about it, why I have this next week. I just have the Mixdown with a low cut. This is what I usually use for the small break or even for the break. You can see it's always nice before to introduce a new element. You see I will often do a small break. So it's just an EQ with a low cut that I activate, deactivate. I'd rather use that than removing the kick, because I feel like the thing is still grooving and you just feel like, okay, you make the listener aware that something new is coming. But again, I will talk about this next week. It's more like arrangement purpose than really sound design. And I have this riser effect, which is kind of a washout effect. Same, the return is a washout effect. I will talk about it next week. And then the master with the master chain. All right, so in terms of sound design, MIDI, and everything, I think I cover everything. So hope you like it, guys. If you want to grab the template, it's a great way to support me. The link in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Next week's part 2, where we're going to talk about the arrangements, mixing and mastering. And yeah, thank you for coming by. See you soon, guys. Bye-bye.